Charles Goyette is one of the most informed and smartest guys we've had on The Truth, meaning I wanted to have him back. And here he is. Charles Goyette, an author, a radio personality, and a political student. And he's just authored a paper called The Empire of Lies Comes from Iran. Charles, welcome back to The Truth.
So, John, it's great to speak with you again. It's been a while, and I always enjoy talking to you. Thank you.
Well, likewise. So I've been saying that I wish President Trump had called me before he went to war with Iran, because I would have told him, Mr. President, wars are easy to start. They're really tough to end. Don't you think that's what we're seeing played out in real time?
As he's finding out now, and it's like he's stuck to the tar baby, so to speak, and he doesn't know how to get it off of him. He's stuck to the thing, and he was advised over and over again by good people that had his best interests at heart and our country's best interests at heart. Don't do this. You don't understand. But he surrounded himself with a bunch of yes men, and it was clear that they were a bunch of yes men by his own admission. It was Jared and it was Witkoff and stuff like that they really weren't qualified to be advising him. And I think basically it came down to Netanyahu.
I think you're right, but I guarantee you, without knowledge, my supposition is that the CIA was cheering him on all the way, because they seem to love wars.
Don't they, though?
Yeah, and I don't love them. I love the dedicated men and women who put it on the line every day for our country that are in those organizations, but I'm not fond of the management. What's his name? The head of the CIA.
Right, the one right now?
Yeah.
Oh, what's his name?
Oh, it just skips my mind, but he's a good guy.
Is it Ratcliffe?
No, he was a member of Congress. It was John Radcliffe. Maybe it is John Radcliffe. I think it's John Radcliffe.
I think it is Radcliffe.
Yeah, put your brain together with mine. We got a whole one. And he was such a good guy, and he was transparent, and he was open. And where is he today? I mean, talk about somebody who's disappeared off the face of the earth.
It reminds me of that old saying we used to, congressional races and stuff back where I'm from and where I used to be involved in things like that. The expression was, when you send your guy, he's a guy that agrees with you, a guy that knows the story, a guy that you can count on. You know him from the Little League games or the grocery store or your church or something. But when you send your guy to Congress, he's not your guy anymore.
That is so true.
It's just they're compromised from day one.
I have a good friend who, I'm from Atlanta originally.
Okay.
That's where I raised my family anyway. I'm actually from Ohio originally. But the better part of my adult life was spent in Atlanta. And a really good friend of mine from Atlanta knows Christopher Wray. And every time we had a conversation about the FBI and Christopher Wray, he would jump to his defense. He isn't defending him anymore. He is not the same Christopher Wray my buddy used to see at the Little League Diamond, which is, to your point, exactly how they got to know each other. Well, let's talk about Iran. Ben Franklin said it best. It is the opening line of your article. There has never been a good war or a bad peace. Are we going to achieve peace with Iran? And one thing you said, I actually differ with you on, respectfully. I was all in favor of the Iran war, and I still am, because I've got a 2-page fine print recitation of all the acts of terrorism that Iran has either been directly responsible for or have sponsored over the last 50 years. And they have claimed thousands of American men and service women's lives. And I'm tired of it. And I think, you know who I really blame? Ronald Reagan. He had the perfect opportunity to hold them accountable for taking our embassy and holding 66 diplomats hostage for 444 days in the late 70s. And if anybody had the justification to neuter Iran, it was Reagan. But he wouldn't do it. Why? Because they handed him the election on a silver plate.
Well, John, I know it won't be the end of our great friendship,
No, it
but
won't.
I'm going to have to disagree with you about the entire thing. And I could start really with the 47 years ago. And I hear this all the time. Oh, we've been at war with them. They've been at war with us for 47 years. And, we should have shut them down in 1979. I was a very young man when the Iranians took to the streets in 1979 and they were burning American flags and shouting death to America. And I watched this stuff in horror and I thought, what in the world is wrong with these people? And but of course, at the time, I didn't understand it, and I didn't realize that history didn't just start in 1947. So we had toppled the Masada government, an elected government in 1953. It was kind of an oil grab for BP and for American oil companies. We toppled that government. Your favorite friends, the head of the CIA, Alan Dulles, actually personally escorted the reviled Shah back to the throne, the peacock throne in Tehran, and installed him. The way they got their demonstration and they toppled the elected government in 53 was the same old thing they do today. They armed thugs in the streets. They paid off thugs. They had snipers shooting people on both sides to create havoc and so on and so forth. So it started then. But here's something really peculiar about what happened in 1979. When the Shah abdicated, when the Shah left, the students didn't riot and they didn't occupy the embassy. And they didn't occupy the embassy until we gave the Shah sanctuary, thanks to David Rockefeller, here in the United States. And then they thought on ample precedent, the people thought on ample precedent, the United States is at it again. They're going to try to reinstall the royalty. And that's when the riots started. And that's when they took the embassy. So that's part of it from my perspective. Also, you know, when we went into Iraq War looking for the weapons of mass destruction, we found, wasted, desiccated old remnants of long ago chemical weapons, maybe some biologics as well. Those were remnants of the 1980 war in which our guy Saddam Hussein attacked Iran. We abetted Saddam's acquisition of illegal chemical and biological weapons. Hundreds of thousands of Iranians died, but Saddam was our guy, and we rode to his aid with breaking international laws and conventions to arm him up with some of the most horrendous weapons in the world. And the Iranian people remember this, and the American people don't. So the Iran has been sinned against very badly for my entire lifetime by the United States. And so, when you say, they grabbed the embassy in 1947, death to America, well, there was a lot of precedent for why they did it.
But consider this: November 1979, 66 American embassy workers were held hostage for 444-day standoff.
Yeah.
September of 1984, they car bombed our embassy in Beirut, killing 23 innocent people, and desecrated the U.S. Embassy annex in Beirut.
Well, we should have been there, and Reagan knew enough to get us out, by the way.
Well, but that's like blaming the wife for the husband that's beating her. The 1984 Iran-backed Hezbollah terrorists hijacked Kuwaiti Airways 221 en route to Pakistan, killing 2 American officials. July of 1989, Iran Hezbollah terrorists killed U.S. Marine Colonel William Higgins after kidnapping him the previous year while he was serving on a UN peacekeeping force in Lebanon. Charles, it goes on. It's fine print. It's 2 pages long of one dastardly terrorist act after another. So your argument is there are no white hats, so let the wars rage. Well, the adults have got to show up at some point, but we can't turn the other cheek the whole time.
Yeah, we're not the adults in the room. The United States wade in to the middle of a 1,400-year-old religious schism that we knew nothing about, John. We took sides in a battle between Shia and Sunni that we knew. Oh, let me just share with you how pathetically unarmed we are intellectually to enter these kinds of wars. 4 weeks before we went into the Iran war, a group of Iraqi expatriates went to call on President Bush, sat in the Oval Office with him to talk about, what happens after we topple Saddam Hussein? How does the country go? And they're talking to him about the populations in Iraq, and they go, well, the Sunnis, the Shias, and so on. And Bush says, this is your president weeks before a elective war that he wanted. Bush said, Sunnis? Shias? I thought Iraqis were all Muslims. So help me. This isn't internet gossip. I have this from a United States ambassador. I mean, it's pathetic. We're in the middle of a battle about who is the successor to Muhammad. I tell you the truth, I don't really care. And the American people don't care. And we keep going in and wading into these things. But if you look at, you look at where the deaths came from, for example, the IED deaths and so on in Iraq, they came not from Shia, they came from Sunnis. The great majority, you can get it from the Defense Department, the great majority of them came from Sunni Islam, not from Iranian allied Shia. And virtually all of the terrorist incidents in the United States have been conducted by Sunni Islamists, I don't think there's been one by Shia Islamists in the United States. So we go blunder into the middle of this long simmering war. And, are you surprised when you invade a country that the people there are going to respond and react to you? So a huge part of the population of Iraq was Shia. So the Shia start bombing us, and they start constructing IEDs. Actually, my friend Scott Horton has traced the existence of the IEDs not back to Iran, but all the way back to their creation by the Irish Republican Army. So the picture is vastly more complicated, but to me, it always comes down to this, John. It's intervention in search of monsters to destroy all over the world that we don't understand. We don't understand the problem. Do you ever see the Mickey Mouse movie by Walt Disney called The Sorcerer's Apprentice? And Mickey goes into the sorcerer's workroom, the magic room, and he starts flipping the magic wand around, and all of a sudden things start to come alive and spin out of control, and he is not competent to manage them. And things get out of control. Next thing you know, it's a flood, it's a cataclysm, it's a deluge. And this is what we do. We go into these places, we topple governments and so on. We have no idea what we're doing or what the consequences will be. The best course of action is not to make, not to sacrifice our own independence and get mixed up, as our founders warned us, in these eternal foreign squabbles.
Well, it is a non-debatable point of view. I get it. But what do you do? Do you trust the Iranian regime?
I don't trust any government. They all lie.
Well, do you trust them more or less than any government?
I don't trust any governments. I mean, it's not. I don't have a 10 scale.
Clearly, I mean, are they all bad to a -10? I mean, are there any gradations where
governments lie to protect themselves? And they lie to protect themselves from embarrassment or from failure. They lie to perpetuate their own authority. Look, I'll tell you.
I 100% agree. But do you, when you look at the governments all around the world, where do the Iranian leaders stack up in your estimation?
Yeah, they stack up like all governments. I mean, they rule people, they move people around. We prop up the governments that do the same things all over the world. We propped up the Shah of Iran. He massively moved people around. We brought in the United States and the Mossad to teach him, the Shah, how to torture his own people. It became the most cruel secret police in modern history, the Savak. I mean, we can't even understand the depth of his corruption.
I think that's
the way he plundered his country.
I think that's a very good point. Now, how do you compare the leadership of Iran to the leadership of the United States? Are we on an equal level with them in your estimation?
Well, I think it's not anything that I would chart or be able to chart, but if we haven't learned during the course of this war that the government will lie to you about things, I don't know who's higher, who lies at a 9.5 rate and who lies at a 9.1.
I love my wife. We've been married 48 years. If I had to identify one weakness, she can be fast and loose with the truth, but that
Hmm.
doesn't make her a bad wife. So I get the fact that lies are material, especially when you're talking about peace around the world, and that is an appropriate judgment for governments. But what about genocide? Do you think
Yeah.
that killing 43,000 of their own people give them the moral right to lead their country?
I don't think they have the moral right to lead their country. If you're talking about the deaths of Iranian citizens
Yeah,
last at the turn of the year,
yeah,
okay, here's the thing. If you go back, if you look at Scott Bessant testifying to Congress, he said, we intentionally embarked on a maximum pressure campaign to break their currency to create revolution in the streets at that time. And Trump said, we gave them guns, we gave them lots of guns. So we're in there fomenting a revolution, just like we fomented a revolution in Ukraine, just like we foment revolutions all over the place. And then the consequences are horrific, and people start shooting each other, and thousands of people die. That's a very bad thing. If you want to tranquilize, if you want to democratize, if you want to civilize a government like Iraq, the first thing you need to do is end the sanctions. And I want to give you just one example, if you'll let me, of why that's important. We put, after the first Gulf War, we put really, really harsh sanctions on Saddam Hussein. The net result was that Saddam Hussein, we created an oil for food program. So the central government of Saddam Hussein was in charge of the food distribution in that country. It empowered him. So if you were a dissident group, you got no food. If you were Kurds that were breakaway, you got no food. If you were his army, if you were Saddam's police, his loyalists, members of his party, then you got ample food. So all of these sanctions always empower the central regime. We put sanctions on Cuba in 1959. Guess what? Fidel Castro and his brother never missed a meal, but the people in Cuba sure did. And the sanctions persist to this day, long after the Soviet Union, which was supposedly the threat at the time, has expired. If you want a democracy, look, when you make conditions severe, economic pressure and so on, countries, it doesn't make them more peaceful. It makes them rally around the flag, and the central government, evil though it may be, and it generally is, becomes more powerful, not less. We should have ended the Cuban sanctions years ago. We should never put those sanctions on Iraq, and we should end these awful sanctions on Iran so that the civilized people there can become prosperous again and take over their country. That's what I
Okay,
would
well,
like.
there's a little problem with that right now.
Yeah,
They had uranium enriched to the level of 60%,
right.
according to people that I respect and have listened to in the United States Senate. I don't know that I really respect Lindsey Graham, but I do.
I hope not.
I do think that he has a level of knowledge that I do. Whether I believe him or follow him is situational. But on this topic, I tend to. At some point, we've got to put our trust in someone, but our government has repeatedly, at all levels of our government, not just Lindsey Graham, but President Trump, have maintained that they had uranium enriched to 60% and
That's
90%
true.
was a month away.
60%. They weren't a month away. 60%, yes.
Yeah, 60%, but to get
Yeah.
from zero, or I guess uranium is in its natural state is like 5 or 10%. To get from 10 to 60 is a real steep curve, but to get from 60 to 90 is a very shallow curve, and that they claim they were a month away from having a nuclear weapon, and that was why there was
Yeah, and
urgency.
that was absolutely false.
Yeah. Okay,
Absolutely,
tell
stunningly
tell
false.
us your evidence for claiming that that's false.
Okay, well, it's a little bit complicated, but 60% uranium is not even close to a bomb, and it's not just a question of refining uranium to 90%. It's not just a question. The engineering, during the Iraq War, we would talk about this stuff, and people would say, "Oh, and there were disinformation people that wanted us in that war that would float these stories." And one of the stories they floated was that the reason we can't find the nuclear weapons program is that some leading scientists have moved it into their basement. This is absurd. These are huge industrial projects. They take a lot of time, energy, equipment sourced from all over the world. The the real problem that the Iranians face, even if they got to 90% enrichment, is what do they do with it? How do you make the containment structure that forces all this material into critical mass so that it can actually explode? Years of testing ahead of them. Years. How do you deliver it? Years of testing ahead of them. The idea that they were a month away from a deliverable nuclear weapon is just silly, but don't take it from me. You've got all of the American intelligence agencies. Look, if the American intelligence agencies that tell us that Iran has no active nuclear WMD program, if they're lying to us, maybe we can get our money back because we spend hundreds of billions of dollars on these clowns. If they're lying to us and it's not true, but they've come out with that over and over again, even during the Trump administration. No active nuclear weapons development program, none.
I mean, if you want me to play devil's advocate illustrating your point, I saw a video recently of John Kerry saying that they were 60 days away from developing a nuclear weapon, and that was like 6 years ago.
Oh, you should track Netanyahu.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh, yeah. For real, he's been saying it for
25
decades.
years. Yeah.
And then also, President Trump told us that we had annihilated their nuclear program because we dropped that bomb that goes way down into the center of the earth and almost gets to where the devil lives, and that the nuclear materials was gone.
I know.
So, you make some really valid points. I guess, I don't know. I'm just so bitter over their taking our embassy and our diplomats. 50 years ago, I lived through that. It cost Jimmy Carter his administration, which I guess was probably a gift to us in the long run. But they do seem to be a very evil empire. And I know a fair number of Persians. And the people I know that are from Iran are some of the nicest, hardest working, smartest people I know. And they don't like the leadership in Iran. And they've got relatives that are living in Iran.
But the expatriates always want the Americans to go in and reclaim their country for them. What are we, the dummies? Or are we the big muscle-bound bozos that have to go in and, settle all the scores? Of course, expatriates fled here because they wanted to get away from the rule that would. They had their good thing under the Shah, but when that came to an end, they had to get out with their families because another group was going to take over power there. Expatriates all over the place want us to invade their countries and settle the score, and it's not our job. But let me tell you what they've done with it. We keep going back to 1979 and when they took the embassy and they burned the American flags and death to America and stuff. You know what they've done with that embassy? They turned it into a museum, and it's called the Espionage Museum. And volunteers spent years. Talk about painstaking work. I wouldn't think about doing it for 10 minutes, much less for the years that it took. When the Shah fell, the CIA operation in that embassy went crazy shredding stuff because they knew that they didn't want to get caught having done what they had done in that country. The politicians they paid off, the deaths that they had overseen. They didn't want America's fingerprints to show up. So they shredded all their documents. Over the course of years, volunteers went in there and they reconstituted all of those shredded documents, turned them into a book. They piece by piece by piece. The whole place is a museum, the Espionage Museum. You could see still the control room where the CIA, was sending orders about who to do. You could see which politicians they were corrupting and paying off on behalf of the New World Order. I mean, it's an awful thing. And we even tried to do this when Kennedy was president. The CIA even tried to participate in the toppling of de Gaulle. I mean, this stuff goes on over and over again, and we end up holding the bag for it, and we call it blowback.
And the thing I don't like about it, no one elected these people, and they operate off the books. There's no supervision, there's no accountability, and today we know that they killed the 35th president of the United States. So I'm right there with you. I'm sick of it. And we don't have answers for Building 7. We don't have answers for who tried to take a crack at President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania.
No,
and if you believe that Tyler Robinson killed Charlie Kirk, I've got some property in South Florida I really want to show you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just maddening. And so I get where you're coming from. I guess At the end of the day, when you sift it all out and you're putting it in the recipe to bake the cake, I'm going to defer to President Trump. For 6 years, he truly has never disappointed me. Yes, he's an egotistical maniac. He lied to us about his inauguration. Oh, it's the biggest inauguration in the history of the country. And then there are pictures of Obama's versus his. Yes, we're not going to deface the White House to build the ballroom. And we're going to change the name of the Kennedy Center. I'm still pissed off about that. But at the end of the day, when it's policy and it really matters, I defy you to come up with an example of where Trump got it wrong. I mean, well, and I've just been conditioned to the point where we've got these issues that are such narrow ones to decide. I've kind of have reflexively deferred to Trump. Is that wrong?
Well, to me, it's wrong. I have many, many friends that are in your same shoes, and I don't blame you. I don't condemn, and I don't criticize anybody that feels that way, except to the extent that you have to remember what he ran on, and he ran on Make America Great Again, and that rallied us all. So he wants to raise the defense budget from $1 trillion a year, more than the next 8 or 9 governments around the world combined, to 1.5 trillion. They need a $200 billion supplemental. All of this, we go blow up these countries, we blow up the roads, the hospitals, the schools, and then we go back in at our expense and rebuild it while our own country is breaking down. I mean, I thought Make America Great Again was a pretty good campaign platform, and I just wish to hell he had stuck with it.
Well, and you and I really do like and respect you, Charles, and you've given me a lot to think about just in the few minutes that we've spent together this morning. And there's very little that you've said that I can disagree with, frankly.
Yeah, we're all on the same page.
Yeah, we're on the same team. But I tell you, I think you could also convincingly make the argument that he is making America safe again. Because whether we're the bad dog trainer or not, I've had over 40 dogs in my life. I really know dogs, and I happen to love them. And I've watched how dogs behave when they're mistreated. And when you kick a dog and you mistreat a dog, it becomes an angry dog. And that's the case that you're making for Iran. So I do get it. And I do agree that there are no white hats. I guess it's a question of who's the worst? And I'm with you. The CIA needs to stop meddling in these foreign governments, and they need to adopt a live and let live philosophy, I think. But then on the other hand, do they know things that we don't know, and are there justifiable reasons for us going into these countries? But it's hard to figure it out at the end of the day. I kind of, on the issues of domestic tranquility or domestic war, I do kind of defer, rightly or wrongly, to our leaders, because I just have this premise that they know things that we don't know and will probably never know. And there's the empire of lies.
The whole backstory that's been hidden from us is in this book. Empire of Lies, Fragments from the Memory Hole. The entire backstory of all the things we're talking about and the stuff that they are very good at managing. About Operation Mockingbird. How they controlled the press, and it goes on today. We know the lapdog press that we have today. They've been very good at sanitizing their crimes. I was just in Dallas for a wedding, and I went to the book depository museum.
God, don't get me started.
I know.
Oh boy, Anthony, here we go.
I know, and they even in the displays and the mock-ups and the models in that museum, they're still covering for the CIA.
Totally.
The cat's out of the bag.
And the mainstream media continues to assert that Oswald acted alone, in spite of the fact that he had no paraffin on his body. He said, "I'm just a patsy," and there are no fingerprints in the cypress nest of Lee Harvey Oswald, but there are of Mac Wallace, who was Kennedy's assassin. I'm sorry, not Kennedy's. Yeah, Kennedy's assassin, but he was Johnson's hitman.
Yeah, Johnson's hitman.
And so come on. And Allen Dulles was in the CIA in Virginia while the operation was underway. I mean, I've read the books, I've read the materials. On that, we are 100% in agreement. And that's where I decide whether I'm willing to give the CIA a break or not, whether I'm willing to say, well, maybe this, that, or the other. But they were so morally wrong and reprehensible for taking our president. And I've just got this sense that I don't know who killed Charlie Kirk, but
I don't either.
I don't think you could cover it up like it's been covered up without a role of our government in being involved at some level. And I'm not saying where, but it really it seriously pains me when I think about Charlie being snatched from our grasp, because I knew Charlie. He was the smartest person I've ever met. He was a disciple of Christ. He could quote the Bible better than any preacher I've ever met. And he was a patriot in this country. And he was bringing young people back to religion and to patriotism and motivating them to become involved. Why would anybody be so evil as to take him from us? It wasn't
Because
Tyler
of the
Robbins.
Empire of Lies.
All right, Empire of Lies by Charles Goyette is available where?
It's Amazon. Get it at Amazon. I priced it low so everybody can read it. Not to me. I don't care if I make a dime on it.
Well, I swear, I think you told me you were going to send me an autographed copy.
I did. I didn't send you an autographed one, but I sent you one.
You did send me one?
Yeah.
All right,
I had a fulfillment service send it to you a couple weeks back.
It's on my nightstand. I will go dig it out of the other 50 that are sitting there waiting for me to read that I don't ever get to. But you've motivated me. I'm going to go get it, because you have not come with theories. You've come with actual facts, and I am listening to you, and I'm sure our listeners are as well. So I want to wrap up Iran real quick. Are you aware that the U.S. Air Force KC-135 declared an emergency over the Strait of Hormuz, flying in the direction of Doha, and it has disappeared from the landscape, and it is believed that it's just disappeared. But our own government says, oh, no, it's safe.
Yeah, I saw the headline, or a brief, like one-line headline, so I don't know any of the details about it. But I also saw the thing this morning when the United States government, I don't know if it was the Navy or the Defense Department, told shippers when we had Operation Freedom or whatever it was that lasted 24 hours, they told shippers, well, you can try to get your oil out of the strait now by hugging the Omani coastline and see how it works out for you. See how it works out for you. These guys are carrying millions of, if you're Lloyd's of London and they say, okay, we're going to hug the Omani coastline now so we can get out of here. The United States government told us we should try to do that and see if it works. They drop your coverage so fast it'd make your head spin. So, the whole thing, it's impossible to keep up with the thing now. It's got your head spinning.
Well, they declare an emergency and then it disappears, and then we're told that no, nothing happened. Nothing to see here. Don't even bother to look.
You people keep moving.
My theory is that President Trump is trying to wind this down, and he's finding that it is extremely difficult, because I think they underestimated the will and the resolve of the Iranian, I say demonic leadership. You give them a break for being the beat dog, but how do we wind it down?
I don't say they're not demonic. Yeah, he wants to wind it down because it hurts him politically.
Well,
and he says things that are ridiculous. He says, well, I don't care if gas went to $200 or oil went to $200 a barrel, that it would be worth it. Well, it'd be worth it to him. It wouldn't be worth it to me. But
I think
I know he wants out of it.
I differ with you on that. I think it's time to hold them accountable for the things that they've done. Can it lead to a more peaceful world? Can the Iranian people actually have a democratically led country that will put a responsible leader in place? I think that's the goal. It should be, if it's not.
Well, if you end the sanctions, that'll happen.
There you go. Well,
they are the kicked dog.
So don't you think, don't you think, let me see if I can find a less biased way to ask the question. Are we repeating the same behavior in Cuba right now?
Of course.
Isn't Cuba next?
And, we had sanctions on Cuba because they were aligned with the Soviets, and it was a revolutionary regime 90 miles off the coast. And that's why we had sanctions. That was in 1959. There is no more Soviet Union. The missiles have all been taken back home. The Soviet Union doesn't exist, and yet the sanctions persist because what? They're a bad government. The Saudis are a bad government, and we subsidize them. We support them. We support bad governments all over the world. If you want the people to be free and prosperous, stop the damn sanctions on them. It's just
Well,
unbelievable
what we
how
are
far this.
doing to the Cuban people right now is really bad.
Yeah.
We have choked their oil. Did you
Oh, it's
see
awful.
the video that Nick Shirley posted? He went to Cuba for 24 hours.
No, I did not see it.
Well,
Yeah.
he was afraid he wasn't going to be able to get out because after having been there for an hour, he realized that he was being followed by three people that were Cuban intelligence,
Hmm.
and they followed him everywhere he went. And he toured Havana and was showing how there are lines outside the hospitals that they don't have power to operate the hospitals, and they don't have food to eat and cars to drive. That a liter of gasoline is $10, and that the Cuban people are really, really hurting. Then we're going to swoop in as being the saviors. We're going to kick the leadership out and say how bad they were. But the fact of the matter is, they're in that condition right now, largely because we have erected a blockade and we're not allowing
Yeah.
oil to reach Cuba, so they can't operate anything,
We
including their power
squeeze them and
plants.
squeeze them and squeeze them, John. And it's the same thing. I used to get these neocon, these famous neocons like Michael Ledeen on my show 25, 26, 27 years ago. And they'd say, well, if we just squeeze the Iranian regime badly enough, tightly enough, hard enough, if we squeeze them hard enough, then the people will rise as one and overthrow the regime. Well, we've been doing it for 66 years in Cuba. Hasn't happened. We've been doing it. We've been doing it for 46 years and 47 years in Iran. It hasn't happened. But they keep telling us, "Oh, this is the strategy. We squeeze the people bad enough, they'll overthrow their regime."
There is a moral issue at stake. I am very troubled by it. Even though, if it were 1960, I'd feel much differently about it. If there were nuclear weapons that the Soviets were trying to put in, I don't know who is active in Cuba today. I think that the Chinese are. I don't know what the relationship is with Russia. I think President Trump may have, and this is just my guess, said, well, if we're ever going to take Cuba, now's the time, because Russia is stretched so thin with their war in the Ukraine and all that they've got going on in their country, that they're in a weak position right now, and so now is the time to do it. I think in part that Trump is a victim of his own success. In Venezuela, it was so easy to remove Maduro, and it was without any loss of U.S. life. I think there was loss of Venezuela, and were they Chinese soldiers or Russian soldiers that were helping to defend Maduro in his palace? I don't remember.
I don't know.
But I think he thought, well, we'll just go into Iran, we'll kill all the leaders, and then we'll go to Cuba. We'll strangle the economy, and the people will be so desperate they'll welcome us in. But the beneficiary of that really is the future security of America, because it looks to me like Trump is trying to protect the flanks of our country. Venezuela, which is proximate to our southern border, Cuba, which is most proximate to our southern border, and then he proposed this outlandish idea of buying Greenland. I didn't know that countries were for sale, but it would create geographically a perimeter around the U.S., which I do think would be in our best interest, in the name of America first.
Well, I don't think you want to live in a Mad Max world in which the most powerful country can go in and abduct people and leaders of country without international justification or shoot people in boats on the high seas. I don't. That's the Mad Max world, and I remember
I did not like that. I
when
did not like that.
when Thomas Jefferson was drafting the Declaration of Independence in July of 1776, he wrote a line in there that was really kind of important for people to remember. Nobody was going to tell the colonists who to obey and what to do, but he said, I'm not just presenting our list of grievances against the king. I'm doing it for a reason. I'm doing it because of a decent respect for the opinions of mankind, that they deserve to see why we're doing this. but we don't have a decent respect for the opinions of mankind. Not that we would bow or defer to what, some poll taken overseas says that we should do, but we have lost a sense of a decent respect for the opinions of mankind, and we think that might makes right. And that's wonderful when you're on top, but it's not going to be that way. It may be that way the rest of my life or your life, but our own prosperity is waning fast and others are growing fast. It's changing very, very quickly. We're on the cusp of a major economic calamity in this country. Major. If you look at private credit firms, if you look at the banks they're choking, you look at the AI bubble that looks like it could pop any minute. If you look at all this stuff, we got really, really serious problem. They say, well, we'll grow our way out of it. They've been telling us we grow our way out of our economic debt for, I guess I would say 50 years. We never grow our way out. They only print their way out of it. That's how you destroy a currency once and for all. So
all right.
we're not always going to be the top dog. Dogs well. It's nice to be a top dog, but the top dog isn't the top dog.
Let's spend a
forever.
few minutes talking about that, because I do have a very different perspective on it. There's no argument about the debt. Let's be very clear that I think the debt is the greatest threat that this country is facing today, and somebody is going to have to deal with it. But I do believe that President Trump is smart. And I do believe that he realizes how perilous that debt is. And I listened to him very intently. And I think that he has a plan to deal with the debt. I do believe that part of his formula is to outgrow it. And make no mistake, we are outgrowing it right now. Now, I'm not saying that that's the solution, the solution, but I don't think there is the solution, because politically, you just can't stop the Democrats from spending. And they are demonstrating that as bad as they are, and as much as we dislike them, and as much as we feel that their whole foundation is based on lies after lies after lies and false narratives and really bad stuff. But so I think we have to be smart in the way that we do it. If I'm told that if we curtail fraud in this country, that in itself will stop the growth of the deficit and will actually reduce it.
Yeah, waste, fraud, and abuse.
This is what I think. I'm not trying to convince you of anything, but I'm just putting it out there, and then I'll let you respond to it.
Okay.
I think it's a multi-pronged approach. First was the big, beautiful bill. And I don't know that it really accomplished a whole lot in the terms of the tax relief that it's offered to, because first of all, no tax on tips. Don't kid yourself. Those people aren't paying tax on tips anyway. That money's going in their pockets. Do you think that a waitress in Peoria is actually counting the tips that she gets and reporting on her taxes? I don't believe so. No tax on Social Security, but if you earn over $75,000 a year, you still have to pay tax on it. So that doesn't really accomplish as much as we're led to believe that it does. But still, consumer confidence and belief in our economy is what drives our economy, and it has boosted the spirits of the American people. That combined with the tariffs, a lot of the tariffs have been eliminated for the time being, but they're working on restoring the tariffs. The tariffs had a potential of $600 to $800 billion of newfound money for the United States. If that would be devoted to reducing the deficit, and we're told that it would, that will go a long ways. And then you combine that with the $19 trillion of capital that companies have pledged to deploy in America over the next now 3 years that are remaining. That is significant. So those things will rise the tide. Now, if you couple that with eliminating the fraud, then I think we can get meaningful budget relief, and we can get this national debt under control. Now, you tell me why that doesn't work.
Well, if you'd like to have a legislature made up of honest elected officials, vote for all of them that come out and say to you, look you in the eye and say, I'm in favor of waste, fraud, and abuse. Because they all say that they're against waste, fraud, and abuse. I chided Vivek Ramaswamy the other day. He came with something on X about, well, if we just cut the waste, fraud, and abuse. Oh my God, do you know how old I am? Do you know how long I've been hearing this?
Well, since the $80 hammer at the Pentagon when we were children.
Well, what did the Republicans do with Doge? Nada.
They
Zilch.
absolutely
Nothing.
killed it. But now they
Nothing.
put J.D. Vance in as the fraud czar, and I do have a pretty high level of trust with JD. I think he wants to be president, and he does not want to be the border czar that Kamala was, where she did nothing and she got nothing and lost the trust of independents and people that were voted independent. They turned against her because she delivered nothing. I think JD looks at this as an opportunity that he really can bring meaningful reform. And I think Marco Rubio has signed up because he too wants to be president.
Well, the level of taxation, this is Milton Friedman line, the level of taxation in an economy, that's like a weight on the people, just like, $110 Brent crude is a weight on the people. It's like a new tax. It's like 50% increase in the price of gas is like a tax. It's a repressant on the economy. But Milton Friedman said, the level of taxation in a country is equal to the level of government spending. So if you don't see government spending leveling off, then taxation, the plundering of the people, is increasing at the same time. I don't have any faith based on evidence, based on the historical precedents, that anything will be done except to expand the budget until actually it's critical now. I don't think there's any way out.
We
of
are
it
approaching a tipping point, I do believe.
Yeah.
But Trump is not an idiot. And, I had dinner with Steve Moore and Art Laffer 6 weeks ago. They're chattering in the president's ear. They get it. And I don't know about Scott Bessent. I want to believe in him. And I would believe in him almost unqualifiedly were it not for the fact that he worked for George Soros twice. That's a pretty significant asterisk on his CV for me.
Well, I will tell you something in terms of the conservative movement and stuff. You're in the majority, and I'm very clearly in the minority. And my view is what divides us is the majority of people in the conservative movement rely on, trust, and have faith in Donald Trump. I do not. That's the dividing line.
You're not alone, but I don't know what the alternative is.
Well,
I
didn't say
really
there was an
don't.
alternative.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a national government that we depend on for virtually everything that we do on a daily basis. They are controlling the food that we eat, the gas that we use to power our cars, the safety of our borders, and the stability of world peace. And I mean, I think you got to give Trump credit that he has ended 8 wars or skirmishes. Classify them
I don't
how
even
you
know.
may.
I don't know about that. I don't know that that's true. I don't know. I've heard him say that repeatedly. I give him credit for the border. The border's more or less under control now.
Not more or less, Charles. Now, come on. The border is shut. Come on.
Well, maybe it is. And I'd say I give him credit for what he's done with the border.
Yeah.
End of the story. I can't quantify it, but I give him credit. I'm from Arizona. I know something about the flood that we've had there for 25 years, 30 years
For sure.
over that border. So I give him credit for that. I'd like to think that our tax dollars aren't still going to third world countries and to illegals in here to pay for their sex change operations. I'd like to think that is over with, and we're not mutilating, prepubescent kids any longer. So I want to give him credit for the things that have happened in our country
and not allowing men to play in women's sports.
That's fine. I'm
Just
glad of
go
that.
down the
I'm
list.
very happy about that. But the big issues that determine the freedom and prosperity of the American people are always war and money. When the money system goes, everything goes. Wars are paid for in America and have been paid for in America for over 100 years by inflation. That's what pays for it's not a coincidence that after the Iraq War, we had the 2008 meltdown. It's not a coincidence we had the stagflation decade after the Vietnam War, deficit spending, the guns and butter spending. All of our wars for over 100 years have been paid for by inflation. When the money goes, everything goes.
That is indisputable. You are 100% right. That's how we paid our World War II debt. We had the greatest inflation up until that point.
Well, John,
in our
let me ask you a really important question. What would shatter your implicit trust in Trump's judgment or what he does? What would happen that would shatter that?
I don't know. I haven't contemplated that question. I guess I would say that I'll be like Ted Kennedy and drive off that bridge when we get to it.
Well, don't stay in any late night Chappaquiddick parties. I'll tell you that.
Well, it's a fair question, and the thought has crossed my mind. I just feel that my sense is, having been a student of politics and government for my entire, not my adult life, my entire life, when I put on my first bumper sticker for Richard Nixon in 1959, I've watched Trump. I've studied him. He is the hardest working person I know, second only to Elon Musk. And if you put it in the context of a 79-year-old, he is the hardest working person maybe in the world. And I think he's doing it for our country, and I think he is doing it selflessly. That doesn't mean that he and his kids aren't profiting along the way. Every world leader in the world profits. There's a reason that Putin is the richest man on earth. I think that's just sort of part of the game, and I think that's why we focus on Biden's dementia rather than his corruption. Did you notice how fast that whole investigation from Jim Comer just went away? Yeah. I mean, $60 million, we've got him dead to rights, and then. Yeah.
It was an indictment of the intelligence community too. You know, here's the opinion of the retired intelligence professionals. You know that the Hunter Biden laptop has all the signs of a Russian disinformation program.
Yeah,
I mean, these people are so corrupt from top to bottom.
So they're so corrupt, and I don't know how you fix it. I really don't.
Well, you end the empire. It's the empire of lies. You cannot have, this is Mark Twain, you cannot have a republic of free people and an empire at the same time. The two are not compatible.
Mark Twain was a very knowledgeable person with a lot of wisdom. Who can argue with that? But who are you going to select? What leader can we select and put them in power that will be moral and ethical and not succumb to be a puppet of the deep state? And I unfortunately, I got to wrap this up because we've solved America's problems. Now I got to go on to solving Nigeria's problems.
Okay, let me say
I've
one
got a
thing.
prince waiting on us.
Let me say one quick thing to discredit myself before we go.
No, go right ahead.
You know who I sent money to the other day? I haven't sent money to a politician since Ron Paul. You know who I sent money to?
We hadn't sent any money to The Truth with John Gordon, I can tell you that. We need it.
You know what politician that I sent money to? And this drives the MAGA people. Actually, the MAGA thing, in my view, is so totally split. Half the MAGA people get it. Half the MAGA people are angry at me for it. But I told him the other day on a show, I said, I just sent a big contribution. I don't think it was that big, but I sent a contribution to Tom Massey. Why? I want the budget under control. I want the wars to end. I want, I would like to get to the bottom of the Jeffrey Epstein thing.
I'd like to get to the bottom of all that stuff.
I would too.
I think we deserve it. We need a cleansing in America if we're ever going to reclaim the moral authority to lead the world. That's my issue, frankly. And on that, you and I are in rabid agreement.
What we want, we're all in agreement. We're both in agreement. What we desire. We're both in agreement. We want a free people, honest government, healthy American culture. Those are all things that we want. Prosperous people.
Well, why don't you and we'll get Tucker and Megan, and we'll even invite Dan Bongino to the party, and we'll organize a 1 million man march on Washington, and will assemble in front of the CIA and the NSA and demand transparency, accountability, and a stopping of the madness. I just want them to behave according to our Constitution and the laws of this country. I don't think that's too much to ask, and I think it's damn well time that the American people stand up, join hands, and insist on it.
Well, I think that's a great note to end it on then, as you say, because these are the things that we so agree on, and it's so important to, my kids, my grandkids. They're so important.
Charles Goyette, an author, a scholar, a patriot, my friend. Thank you for coming on. We were only supposed to talk for 30 minutes, and damned if we haven't spent almost a whole hour. But let's get together again anytime, and continue to analyze these problems because, we can sit here and agree with each other all day long. I don't know that we accomplish anything.
Right.
But when we can have a healthy intellectual discussion about things, I think it really does help us get to this sign that's right over here in our studio, and it's labeled The Truth.
Yeah.
Charles Goyette, thanks for joining us once again on The Truth. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Anytime, John. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.